And in business, reports released by the National Bureau of Statistics have revealed that sectorial distribution of value-added tax (VAT) data for the second quarter of 2019 reflected that the sum of 311.94 billion naira was generated. Now this is higher than the 289.04 billion naira generated in the first quarter of 2019 and the 269.79 billion naira generated in the second quarter of 2018. It was also reported that the manufacturing generated the highest amount. Meanwhile, the Federal Inland Revenue Service announced that Nigerians will start paying value-added tax on both domestic and international online transactions effective January 2020, however subject to government approval. Oladejo Adeyemi, Manager Commercial Practice Group at Andersen Tax, joins me now. Thank you for joining me in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the reports by the National Bureau of Statistics that just came out this morning, it showed that we had an improvement in the VAT revenue generated.
Yeah.
While this is an increase, don't you think this is quite, it still has a long way to go when compared to other crimes?
It sure does. And of course, the report, even though the report reflects an improvement in collection, you know, I've read that it's about the highest in maybe about 7 years.
Yes,
and then
exactly.
what even higher than what it was in Q1. The fact is that that's not quite surprising, you know, because efforts have actually been ongoing on the part of the FIRS to ramp up collection. And then I think what we've seen in the results, you know, it's actually the outcome of some of those efforts. Even though people or taxpayers have been talking generally on their own view, you know, talking about their own view on some of those initiatives that the FIRS have deployed to achieve these numbers. The fact remains that the efforts are yielding results, and then talking about the appropriateness of some of those efforts, you know, it's a different kettle of fish altogether.
But then we also see that while we're grappling around the fact our tax to GDP ratio has been on 6% for such a long time, we still have issues around the informal sector when it comes to tax collection.
Absolutely.
Because you're on the road, you're seeing that bus drivers and conductors are being taxed. Where is this money going to?
You see, the taxation of the informal sector, it's a big challenge, you know, for the Nigerian industry, you know, and there's a lot of work to be done in there. And to be honest, right, there's also a lot of money, you know, to be made for the government from that sector. The fact remains that the contribution to GDP, you know, that stood at 6% over the years, you know, it's actually it's showing that the informal sector had not been properly taxed. That sector remains untaxed. So what needs to be done exactly? There is a lot of data mining activities, you know, that have been going on, but to effectively capture that sector, you know, and properly tax that sector, you know, remains a challenge that the FIRS have not been able to. And how can you achieve that? A lot will have to rest on the use of technology. You know, you would have to use technology to drive a lot of those initiatives. So the fact is, that sector, if properly taxed, would change the narrative completely. I can tell you that it's a given. If that sector is properly harnessed, and everyone, like you mentioned, you know, the vulcanizer, you know, everyone on the street gets to pay use our own taxes, you know, we are certainly going to see an improvement.
To the right.
Absolutely.
Because at the end, we don't know where these things are, we don't know where these monies are being channeled to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then we also have the issue of the non-state actors. What can be done about this particular set of people? Because they are collecting these monies and we can't account for them.
Based on the approved list, you know, you actually have different tiers of the government that should actually collect different taxes. You know, so some of those levies that you see them collect, they actually have by law, you know, they actually have the right to make some of those collections. But the fact remains that where that is not checked, you know, it could lead to multiple taxations, and you don't want that to happen. And that's what that act is actually there for, you know, to ensure that the state government isn't collecting what is due to the federal government, and federal government isn't collecting what is due to the local government and stuff like that. So a lot needs to be done, you know, truly on that informal sector. A lot needs to be done on ensuring that there isn't multiple taxation, you know, in Nigeria. And then, of course, if you take VAT, for instance, collection of VAT is typically shared between the three tiers of government, you know, and I think 50% goes to the federal, 15% goes to the federal government, 50% goes to the state government, and then you have
for the local government.
The remaining 35%, you know, shared among the local government. So the fact is that work needs to be done. A lot of work needs to be done, you know, on appropriately taxing the informal sector. And then if we go to the recent discussion or the recent pronouncement made by the FRS chairman, you know, saying online transactions are going to be taxed.
Exactly,
so
yes.
you also see that some of these initiatives are good, you know, but the basis, for instance, for VAT.
But would you see that, sorry, would you say that, do you think this will have the potential of affecting customer spending?
It will, because what you will see is if you are going to be charged, you know, for doing online transactions.
Yes, both domestic transactions and international transactions.
Because that's the perception that people will have, you know, about it. The fact is nothing has changed. The VAT Act that imposes collection, you know, VAT hasn't changed. The fact is that the method of collection that FRS is trying to adopt is different. So, and can that method be effected without changing the provisions of the law? You know, okay. that's the big issue. So the law requires that you self-account, you know. Manufacturing concerns, for instance, by that NBS report, you see manufacturing shows that about 34 billion. So they have input VAT, you know, to charge. They have to recover their input VAT before remitting the output VAT. So if you go online, right, and they've sold goods online, you've taken that off them if that online thing is just done by the banks. So there are a lot of, and that's why the chairman had to mention that it's subject to government approval, because a lot of thinking, a lot of research, you know, must be done. A lot of things need to be put in place, and the law should be reviewed.
But then we see that based on a survey done by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, there was a conversation around it's really not about not paying taxes, but they want to see that whatever it is they are paying for is being channeled to the right causes. We're talking about education and infrastructure. But thank you very much for joining me in the studio.
Not a problem.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all on business news. Still ahead on Plus TV Africa is our roundup on entertainment and sports. We will be back in a moment.